Hello, person one. Hello there. Just going to top up some water. Back in a second. I'm back. Two people. Hello, two people. How are the both of you? Back to one person. Two people again. If you've got any Linux questions, you want to talk about Linux stuff or whatever, go ahead. I'm going to be doing like a bit of a showcase of TTYSH, bits and pieces here and there. So I don't know how much I'll do today of showing off TTYSH, but I will be doing some of that. 3 people now. But in the meantime, if you've got any Linux chat or normal chat or whatever chat you want to chat about, that's all good. Hi, Iron Fist, you right? Guessing the thumbs up means you are. That's good. You got a breakfast taco today, like you did yesterday? Muesli day. Nice. I'm more of a granola man myself. Paul Edouard. I'm listening in, but doing breakfast. It's morning here. How much do people use ChatGPT to maintain their Arch Linux having a bagel with hummus? Okay, whoa, a lot to unpack there. Oh, it's not really a lot to unpack. Well, I'm pleased you're enjoying your breakfast there. Well, let's start off with let's have a little chat about AI, because why not? Why not? How do you guys feel about AI, first of all? In general, do you think, say, ChatGPT is useful, is a good thing? For example, if you had a tech issue, would you use ChatGPT, whether it's coding or Linux? I've toyed with it for C or some shell scripting for ideas. It just has a lot of reliability issues. I used it to rescue two systems and love how it spits out config files, but it's not perfect. Yeah, so what speaks to me whenever I hear about AI in tech, and this is generally how I feel about it, is if you're educated in technology at some kind of fundamental level, whether it's Linux, whether it is programming. So let's take, for example, Linux. If you have fundamental understanding of, the Linux file structure, for example, permissions, networking, bash, shell, the terminal, how your package manager works, things like that. So for a desktop level, or of course system administration. So you know how the kernel does certain things, how like init systems, firewalls. If you have that fundamental understanding, things like ChatGPT are obviously like a tool, or an AI can be like an aid to your learning, to finding out some information, because fundamentally you know enough about your system. You just need that additional support. And like additional support, the advice might not be right. Okay. So if you were getting some instruction from somebody might make a mistake, because particularly if it's not cross-referenced on a forum, for example, nobody's responded to confirm or deny that that bit of advice is right. AI has essentially the same fundamental issues. You're getting information, you're getting the support to your question, but if you don't have fundamental understanding, you won't perhaps understand that the command it's offering to you deletes, in some cliche way, your home drive or your home partition or your home directory, right? And it's the same with programming. If you do not have the fundamental understanding of even the basics of programming, maybe algorithms, and again, infrastructure, then AI is going to effectively can keep you ignorant, keep you that sort of learned helplessness, if you hear that term like the Primogen uses, and unknowing, not knowing what's happening, particularly if you're using some kind of critical system, some kind of security led system or customer based system, or it's a business. Vibe coding without knowing fundamental principles of programming, maybe the programming language you're in, the infrastructure, you're probably setting yourself up for failure, upsetting a lot of people, including yourself. So it's like anything. AI is obviously on the hype train. The investment that big business, big tech business has put into it means that they're going to push it as a one-shot solution for everything in your life. Everybody knows that's clearly not the case. Everybody knows that it's an input-output machine. The output looks spookily real, but of course the reality is it's just taking basically a huge internet search engine and dumping it as like a weight system, like a neural net, right? It's taking all that information and giving you the best it thinks, the best result it thinks you need from all these weights, right? So really, it's what everybody's always said it's been for a long time now. AI is just a prediction machine that might be right 50% of the time, 70% of the time, 80% of the time. It's just that unless you have fundamental understanding on the subject or the question you're putting to it, you're not going to know if it's right or not, and that could cause huge issues. So personally, how I feel about AI on any and every subject is that it's probably best just to do the research yourself, do the fundamental understanding yourself. And hey, if you do need AI, you're going to be in a much better place to use ChatGPT without it giving you like a false positive, not false positive, giving you false information, giving you a security issue in technology, for example, doing something nefarious, right? That's how I feel about it. I asked it about eBay fees. They were out of date, so I got them from eBay, informed it. It apologized and acknowledged. Well, that's it, right? So you are running a business, and as an example, you need to know shipping fees. Imagine if you're doing that at scale, because assume now that businesses are going to use AI as a replacement for many roles, which could include in the future getting shipping fees, getting information, maybe putting that into a database, putting that into financials, and the next thing you know, your financials are all wrong because eBay's charged you certain shipping fees at scale, and your ChatGPT answer set you up for failure, and now you've got a huge miscalculation that could harm or sink the business. Especially say if you're a small business, even you imagine now that many small businesses probably use AI to some degree, being an assumption. Plenty are going to be using AI for information. And again, imagine if you think the smartest thing to do might be as a small business, save the time going through the documentation of eBay, asking ChatGPT, and it gives you 10-year out-of-date information on shipping fees or fees. And then very quickly you realize after many orders, you've got, a financial discrepancy, maybe a deficit, and you're not going to be able to pay your bills. I don't know. Maybe it will sink a business sooner rather than later. I know it's a very dramatic example, but in principle, I think we can all agree that, without fundamental understanding in critical areas, in places where it doesn't matter, it's not as important, right? If there's not some critical system or not some critical bit of information that could affect, somebody financially or something else, then maybe it doesn't matter. Although probably in principle, it's not good practice without fundamental understandings. I don't know. Personally, whenever I've used AI, I just kind of disappointed by it. Yep, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Sadly, I think that is the answer to so much in life. Unless you can get the verifiable information somewhere out of the answer an AI gives you, or something, again, it's that thing. You probably wouldn't assume a stranger would give you, say, always accurate information. You'd always be skeptical. I think that's the thing. You don't assume that everything somebody tells you is correct. You might assume they're giving their best effort. I mean, like now, I could be talking to you on AI, and you could assume that everything I've just said is 100% accurate. The details, obviously, I don't really know. The LLMs, construction. I don't know training data, training models. All I see is the outputs from the inputs, right? All the magic that happens in between. Obviously, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to know this. Maybe many of you aren't engineers, so you don't really know. A lot of engineers, it seems, who do AI know the technical aspects to, put training data together, train an AI on these models. To some degree, but maybe even they don't have, absolute understandings. You sort of hear this, it's a black box. And that's the thing. The assumption is from companies and from tech journalism that AI is some kind of magic that, is going to revolutionize the world. And then people might draw assumptions to that as what it says is infallible, right? Can't be incorrect, can't be wrong, until it does go wrong. Because what was that thing? There was that article there was a study, I think, in the past year that said that 95% of businesses that were asked about AI said that AI hadn't effectively given them any financial return. So, for example, I imagine businesses that maybe had less staff, less people on the books, and other staff were expected to use AI, or AI was in some kind of infrastructure, effectively didn't create a financial return. Now, on the corollary, I don't know if it was actually a financial burden. I imagine if you're using something like ChatGPT at some scale, or even if you're, I don't know, an engineering company a tech company that's using it, you're going to burn through those tokens pretty quick and spend a lot of money. So I don't even know how the financials actually end up. Just that certainly at the moment, it seems that AI isn't, a net benefit to companies financially. Hi, Ahmed. And so it'll be interesting to see if AI investment is a bit like the dot-com boom and bust of the early 2000s, when, don't know how many of you are old enough to remember, or have read about it, but the wave of internet domains or companies that were using the internet as their business model exploded, and a lot of companies listed themselves on the stock market, making a big point of being a dot-com company, an internet company, or internet services, or having some affiliation with the internet. And almost overnight in the late 2000s or mid 2000s, was it S&P or the NASDAQ, whatever stock market, effectively crashed and wiped out what trillion plus dollars of internet companies, and so many folded and went under. Have a look on YouTube. There's some interesting documentaries about it, and I do remember at the time. It's quite a dramatic thing. Yeah, like the AI chatbots just don't seem to work when buying products on sites. This is a good point. I like it as an educational tool. It's nice to have feedback on ideas. However, facts and accuracy on present day needs a better approach. Yeah. I'm waiting for a FOSS LLM to rule them all, something that absolutely dominates everything, like how Git and Linux dominate. Yeah. So interestingly, what are the open source models at the moment? Because as far as I'm aware, it's is it Llama, the Meta Facebook one, is open source to almost some point, and DeepSeek. I think a lot of the Chinese ones, maybe ironically, are open source. Is it Gwen or whatever it's called, or Quen from Alibaba or whatever in China? But of course, here's the interesting thing with AI models, because when we talk about a FOSS LLM to rule them all, we're probably talking in terms of local models, aren't we? Because anything that gets sent up to a server, again, is like a black box. Mistral, right, is a black box. So how, how do you control the data? You assume the companies are treating your data responsibly. So it does seem to me like when we had the DeepSeek drama at the beginning of the year, DeepSeek was a game changer, but realistically, using the highest model of DeepSeek meant you had to have still a very expensive computer, or computers, or array of computers, right? There was that whole thing with, was it the Mac Minis that are all stacked together to create what was, I don't know, 70 billion or 700 billion parameters DeepSeek model, the best there was at the time. And of course, the other thing to consider is how soon does that model depreciate, and therefore how adequate is the hardware you've got. That's always something I think to consider, because of course with Git and Linux kernel is nicely scalable over so many computers, so it dominates, right? And Git is command line source control. So whereas LLMs and AIs are, particularly in the local side, are resource heavy and are changing so quickly. So we need open weights, right? Yeah. problem isn't with the source code. It's usually just a Python script that matters more, is the way it's, yeah. Okay, I'll probably give it another minute or two, and then I'm going to do a little TTYSH demonstration on setting up the scheduler. I think I'll do, which is like one of the first things you want to do with TTYSH. Wow, 6 people, 5 people in. Okay, I think I'll just go into it then. Let's share the screen. Have a bit of water. Spill water all over myself. Give a bit. Okay, so if you've watched my previous video on TTYSH, showing you how to install it, how to set it up on a clean Arch install or an Artix install, you're kind of good to go for these next sections, okay? If you are not in that situation and you want to use TTYSH, look in the description. You'll be able to find the links to the previous video and the old video of setting up an Arch install if you want some help with that. Okay, so this is your TTY. Obviously, you've logged in. So as we've done before, we're just going to go into the folder for TTYSH. I will in the near future show you how you can have TTYSH as a, let's say, a quote unquote binary or in your user path so that you can just use TTYSH like any other command. But we're just going to do it the classic way at the moment. Okay, so classic way is // and then TTYSH.sh. Okay, and then it's just going to load up. Q to continue. Okay, so again, assuming you've gone through the previous videos or video and you've done the config, your TTYSH will look something like this, and maybe you've already started playing around with it. So what I'm going to look at first is on the effectively the start screen where it gives you the number of selections, the schedule, the selection tool, help tool, a config wizard if you want to do the config again, and Q for quit, where you can do the schedule tool. If you're wondering why the schedule tool is on like the start screen, the schedule tool is there because personally I like to see my schedule for the day. For example, I like to see various bits of information And this way, it's one of the first things you might do when you boot up your computer. It loads TTYSH or schedule, whatever. Okay, so type SC. So whenever you see brackets, the letters in between those brackets or numbers or alphanumeric in those brackets means that's what you need to enter to do that, let's say, selection. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. And so the first thing it does is it gives you your calendar. Okay, it gives the calendar, and of course it's the 8th today. On this date I'm recording, it gives you the time at the top as well. And so this is the first time I've run the schedule command or started the scheduler. And so what it's actually asking is setting up your calendar data. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a start date, and it probably makes sense to set a kind of start date in the recent times, because the whole point of the calendar is so you populate it with your events coming up, like you would do, say, with Google Calendar. Okay, so you need to set a range. Now, this could be done automatically, but we'll just set up a range. Okay, so let's do, so we know it's 2025. We are in the 10th month, so I'm just going to do 01. Actually, I'm going to do 10 for October, and I'm going to do -01 as well. So you need to do it in this format, and then we're going to set the end date. So I would suggest putting this into the future. So let's just do 2030 maybe, and then we'll do it to the end of the year. Let's do 30. Okay, 12. We'll just do 12. That's fine. And hit enter. So it's going to start setting that up. We'll let it do it, take some moments. Obviously, you won't have to go through this every time. This is just the first time. It's taking some moments. And there we go. So it's made the calendar. So, and it says you can fill in your calendar at the home testing / whatever, and run this run this selection again or continue. Okay, so all we're going to do is it's running less at the moment, so we're going to hit Q to come out of that. And it does give you the option to edit your calendar. So if we type Y, as you can see, we've got calendar in Vim. So obviously you need to know Vim really, but I've got videos on that, so you're lucky. So we know where we are. We're at the 8th today. So I'm just going to put some things for tomorrow. So I'm going to put do a stream. Okay. And then let's say on the 11th, meets up with friends. Okay. And then maybe let's go on. No, let's actually go on the 14th. Let's put sort out my clothes. I don't know. You put whatever you want for your schedule. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to right quit out of Vim. Okay. Now, if you look, it's now piped that. Well, that text is now showing up in less. So as you look at the date, it's showing my schedule. Okay. So if I hit Q and I hit N, I don't need to edit that. That's fine. That's populated, and I can see some events. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Now, here's coming up is my notes. Okay, so I haven't got anything in the notes at the moment. You just see notes at the end there. So it does then give you the option once you hit Q, because again, this is all paged into less. Use Q to end the pager. And the reason I have less as a pager is because you might have a whole lot of information populated in your calendar or your notes, and therefore you can page through it. Okay, so I am going to edit the notes, and I'm going to put do some research on Linux videos, okay, and then maybe walk the dog, and what else? Feed the cat, book the holiday. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So that's my notes, and as again you can see, it's putting the notes into less. Okay, so it's in the less command, so I can Q to come out of that. And again, it gives me the option: do you want to edit? Okay, I'm going to go no. So it's now going to the next thing. Now, do you want to update the weather data? So I'm going to put yes. I'm going to put London. Okay, so obviously wherever you are, you can just put in your location. And as you can see, that's going to be the weather forecast for the next few days, including today for London. Okay. And then do you want to run the RSS reader? Why not? Now I have a function where it splits the screen with a shell. I'm not sure how useful that is. Sometimes I have programs open like Newsboat, the RSS reader, and sometimes I want, say, another shell split screen so I can do some work. Not do some work, but maybe do something else. I don't know. It's something I do occasionally, but I'm going to hit no. Okay. So it's configured. Newsboat. Might be an issue with that. I might have to look at that in a minute. Let's run it again. Hit no. Okay, yeah, it's fine. So the first time it runs, it's just setting it up. Maybe I'll look at that, but it works. Okay, I've just shown you. So obviously I've got my YouTube channel in here. So if you hit enter, contains no feed. So if I do Shift R and then go into it, it's updated it. Do Shift R again, so you can see all of my videos. Now, when you have TTYSH, that is there automatically, so you can have a feed of my RSS for my YouTube videos. Okay, I'm going to hit Q, come out of that, Q again to quit. Do you want to run it again? N for no, and then it goes just straight to the selector. Okay, so if I type TTYSH, it's been a bit funny there. I don't know why, but I'm just going to go back into TTYSH, hit Q, brings up the selector again. Okay, it does work. I just noticed when you first set up some things, it's a bit funny. I don't know why, but that's fine. So we know TTY does work, and that just refreshes the TTYSH program, clears the screen. Okay, but now if I go back into schedule from the start screen, and I look at my schedule again, so 8th of October, etc. As you know, this time my calendar schedule for today now just shows up. Okay, and as you can see, it's paged into less. So if you've got a lot of information, you can just page through this. And what it tries to do is, as like a lot of schedulers, it shows you like 10 days before or 10 days after. So this is really a range of dates in the near future. Of course, if you need to go into the file, you can go into the file. It does give you that instruction at the beginning when you first set it up where that file is, and you can edit. Or if I hit Q, you can edit the file from there. Okay, so again, I can put changed my mind, don't sort clothes on this date, and I escape that, right quit that. As you can see, it's updated that, and that information is now shown in my schedule. If I hit Q, and obviously I don't need to update it again. Okay, and then as you can see, it's now showing my notes. So do some research on Linux videos, walk the dog, feed the cat, book the holiday, hit Q. Again, I can update this. I'm going to take out that, so I don't want to go on holiday now. I don't want to feed the cat. Don't report me. And then right quit. And now obviously I've just got that latest information. Okay, if you look where it's paged into ls, it also tells you where that document is at the bottom there. So I'm going to hit Q, I'm going to hit no. Now interestingly, with the weather file, I don't actually have to update it. So I've just obviously run this effectively this function, and it's given me the weather. Okay, so if you press no, it will output the last time you ran the command, basically. So all this information is stored in a file in the previous time I ran the command. So say for 2 days from now, if that's the next time you come to look at your scheduler or the weather on TTYSH and you press no, it will show you that output from 2 days ago because you've chose not to update it. So it's an option. Okay, so you're probably going to want to update it, but the reason I have that is because you have no obligation to do this. Okay, so if you don't want to update the weather because it connects to the internet or whatever, maybe WTTR, whatever it is, .sh or whatever it is, never remember. WTTR.in is playing up, or you don't want to connect to it. That's stored locally. Okay. And then again, we come to the RSS reader. I'm going to hit no this time. And then again, we come to this. If I hit TTY, it's working fine again. I don't know why it did it that one time. Been a bit funny. So there you go. That's, you know, how to have a schedule on TTYSH. The first time you run it, you're going to want to set it up. That shows you how to set it up. Not too difficult. Just remember, give yourself a nice range of dates for your calendar schedule because you're going to want to update it, right? As you use it months in, months out, years later, you don't want to suddenly run out of a calendar. Maybe I could set a default on that. Maybe that's something to look at. You can always put it on GitHub on the issues if that's something you would like. But that's pretty much it for that one today. So in the coming days, I'm going to be looking at some more of these functions. There's plenty in there. Obviously, play around with it yourself, but I'm going to be covering some more of this stuff in the near future. So anyway, I hope that helped. See you later. Wow, 7 people. How cool is TTYSH, eh? Who needs X11? Who needs Wayland? Who needs any of that? And you've got TTYSH. In case anybody has no idea what I'm talking about, there you go. That's what I'm talking about. Put it in the chat. I feel I need to update the README on the description of what TTYSH. I feel I should call it a text top instead of some sort of desktop thing now, because that's what somebody suggested. First, I wasn't so sure, but I want it in the vernacular. I want it in the vocabulary, text top environment. I think that's what it should be. The one and only text top environment that's, well, text top environment that's being maintained. Let's say that. Who needs GNOME? Who wants GNOME? Who wants KDE? Cosmic Desktop. You've got TTYSH. Yeah, so don't hesitate, guys. If you want to talk about TTYSH or you want to talk about Linux in general, You want to talk about BSD, technology, AI, the anti-cosmic, exactly, the anti-cosmic. Because at the end of the day, as maybe great an engineering marvel cosmic desktop is, built in Rust and all this kind of thing, it's still just yet another desktop environment with pseudo options for tiling window managers, which is just such an anathema to a desktop environment. Same as, imagine installing a window manager and it installs a desktop environment. It's just like they're not overlapping magisteria. I know there's this argument like, oh, some people like, you know, tiling windows in their desktop environment, but again, it's like, that's the point. You use a tiling window manager so you don't have to use a desktop. Paul Edouard, didn't realize that this was your project, and asked ChatGPT about it on Arch Linux, and it gave really good details for installing it and compared it to TMUX screen. What? No, you mean they've scraped my well, of course it's on GitHub, so Copilot and all this, and Microsoft's AI infrastructure and ChatGPT would have scraped it. But how funny that it's mentioned on ChatGPT, and it compared it to TMUX and screen. Well, I'm going to correct it here because it actually uses the functionality of screen, GNU screen, to split screens. So I guess it could be considered compared it to, I don't know, but it does utilize screen to split screens and certain things like CMOS, the music player. You can, Control A D to detach CMOS and use CMOS remote to run CMOS, the music player, in the background. Oh, dude. Hello, everyone. Whoa, the Big Lebowski's in. Cool. The dude. Nameless Monster's in. Hello, Nameless Monster. That is funny. I'm going to ask ChatGPT now what it says about my project. I'm so vain. See what it says. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT what TTYSH is, and for me, it didn't really it kind of gave me like loose definitions of what it could be. So it said TTYSH is like TTY shell, as in it's just your TTY session. But it said there could be possibly projects on GitHub or whatever. Interesting. I'm going to ask it more specifically. See what it says. Oh, it's searching the web. Okay. Oh, how funny. It doesn't really, for me, it didn't really explain what it was. Try again. So it's interesting, Paul Edward, because for me, it hasn't really given me like an adequate, it hasn't really noticed me. So that's interesting. I don't know what your prompt was. What was the prompt you put into ChatGPT out of curiosity? Do you use LLM on a daily basis? No, I almost never use an LLM. Whenever I've used them, I'm usually disappointed, like now. Now, I know it's possibly skill issue. You've got to learn how to prompt, but I don't know. I just, without being like, I'm not trying to be arrogant or conceited, but I generally know enough about something. No, that's not the right way to put it. If I don't understand something or I want to learn something, I will tend to go to the source material. However, if the source material doesn't provide me the answer, I will probably then do, random searches from what other people have done. And then if I can't get that, then maybe I'll try an LLM. An LLM to me, or ChatGPT, is like the literal last resort. And I can usually get the information I need before then. But I certainly wouldn't rely on ChatGPT or LLM as as like a crutch of how to explain it. I wouldn't use it and assume what it's telling me is correct. I wouldn't rely on it to do something important or complicated for me. It's really just like a last resort for me if I can't get the information I need. Yeah. In my output, it emphasizes the fact it does logging and is persistent. Okay. As being a good feature, my prompt described the use of TTYSH as it would be used on Arch. Okay, let's try that. Okay, I'm looking at this, and again, it's not really giving me. I don't know. I don't know why it's just not giving me the same response as it has for you. How strange. And I put in that same prompt. Weird. My searching is not so good, so LLM do it for me mostly, but now I don't know where to go if I face problems. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that really. Again, it's all relative, isn't it? It depends what your kind of stuff you're searching for. If you face problems as well, again, it depending on what you're searching for, maybe always just try and go to the source material, if possible. If you go to the source material, it might inform you better regarding your ChatGPT or LLM searches. I don't know. Maybe that's something you do already. I don't know. Maybe that's easier said than done. I'm not sure what you use it for, if it's just generally or not. Fee Raymond says, now LLM can give you the direct information from the internet. I use it to find stuff. Fair enough. Strange, it took a while to process the prompt for me and gave back 5 detailed paragraphs / points. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I need to learn how to become a prompt engineer so I can find out my own projects on an LLM. Yeah, it's just strange to me. Don't know why it didn't find it. Wow, I've actually got 11 people in here today. Big numbers. Makes me wonder, because obviously I put out a video recently that, hasn't really got a lot of people watching it, but maybe that's sort of prompted people to check out my streams. I don't know. And so later, my sort of first TTYSH video will actually come out, which is the demonstration of installing it and setting it up first time. So that'll be interesting. If anybody watches that, anybody installs it, sets it up. So far, I found GNOME as most stable development and productivity environment. Yeah, I don't know. Again, people work the way that's comfortable to them, but I just can't use GNOME, can't use KDE. I'd never go back to desktop environments where possible. Certainly on my personal computers. Basically, i3 is my limit. I have no problem with like DWM or Awesome WM or whatever, all these other window managers, but window managers is the limit really for me. The ideal is the Linux console, and if I need split pane screens or whatever, I use GNU screen. Problem is compositor. I don't know how to. What do you mean? Set up a compositor in i3 or WM only environment. Well, I mean, when you say compositor, I'm assuming you mean. I assume you're talking Wayland, really, aren't you? Sorry. So let's start again. So if you're, let's assume you're not compiling your software. Do you compile your software, or PyCom? Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Okay, got ya. So you don't want the screen tearing, right? I mean, the easiest way is, unless you've got some anti-Wayland position, the easiest way is just install Sway window manager off of Arch Linux, assuming you're using Arch Linux, and you won't get screen tearing. And you've basically got i3. Sway is just Wayland's i3 equivalent. Unless you have some more sort of obscure need for certain X11 functionality, to be honest, you're probably going to be right with i3, with Sway. Have a look over my videos. It's just a Pac-Man installation. But I do videos on setting up Sway using foot terminal and doing a configuration file. I don't know if that's any use to you. Fee Raymond, XFCE or GNOME. If I had to choose XFCE, just because GNOME is heavier, and again, I just don't need all that stuff personally. I don't want all that stuff. I don't want my computer to idle on all this stuff I have no use for. So if the screen is, if it's effectively drawing all these packages that are running in the background off GNOME and it's drawing all this stuff on the screen, if I'm using XFCE, I'm going to assume it's lighter than GNOME by, a gigabyte or so. The nice thing about my program, let's say my text top environment, TTYSH, is when it's running on just one virtual session, let's say, it's idling at like 150 megs or something. In fact, I can show you. This is what I like. Okay, so if I do HT for HTOP, so let's start from the beginning. So I'm in the folder for TTYSH, ./TTYSH. Okay, let's load it up. Hit Q, hit S for selector, HT, enter for HTOP. If you look at that, look, I'm idling at 134 megabytes on this virtual machine, just using TTYSH. Hit Q and back into the selector for TTYSH, hit H. I can do whatever I want. I can do SRE for screen, get 2 shells, leave that. Let's do H again. I don't know. Anyway, redraw the screen. That's what I like. And again, if I don't need a window manager per se, because I can just do my selector. I can do SR, is it SRE? I can't remember. And there you go, I've got a split screen. I can do SCR double E, and you got a vertical split. And so obviously don't crash GNU screen like so. Wait for that to come out of that. Let's go to another one. Let's say I do SC, I think. What is it? What's the 4 split? SCR. There you go, I've got a 4-way split. And again, you can adjust this as you please. Oh, I've done Control A and then Z, which like sleeps the process. Big mistake. Anyway, doesn't matter. I've used Sway plus Arch, but yeah, it broke many functions. I have second gen Intel CPU, no GPU, Intel 3000 maybe. I mean, yeah, I don't know what happened there. Oh, it broke many functions, yeah. The only thing I think, maybe I should do a video on this. If you're using i3, there is, I think something you can put in, like, is it mod probe or not even mod probe? You can use a part of mod. You can use a part of the kernel that where you can affect the Intel processor, I think, which basically stops screen tearing. I can't remember. I should have done a video on this before, but you can actually put on like VSync or whatever it is on i3 without PyCom. That's my understanding, but I need to do a video on that. So if you need PyCom because you don't like screen tearing, I might have a video in the loop in the future for you. I need to do research on it. I personally, I don't care about screen tearing. Let's just put it like this: it's not an issue for me. But I understand why people don't like it. So assuming you're using obviously an Intel CPU, I might be able to look into it for you. I'm gonna have a little look now on, I think it's on like the Arch wiki or something. Arch. Graphics. Yeah, I don't know if it's troubleshooting. Have a look at this nameless monster. Click on that link, and if you look at tearing, there might be something you can do. Again, I don't think this is Arch Linux specific, but you might be able to get rid of screen tearing on your Intel computer. 134 megabyte with VM running, or is a separate machine? So 134 megabyte is the VM, as in that's inside the VM. It's not the whole computer. It's TTYSH running on a VM, but that's the same performance I'd get on bare metal. After 15 years using Linux, I stabilized with Arch and Suckless tools and have been using them since 2012. No major issues. Good to hear. Good to hear. So I'm guessing you use like what, ST terminal, DWM, those kinds of things. ST, DWM, DWM blocks, yeah. D menus, another popular one. Patches I collected over time. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all those suckless tools are great. In the past, I did use, was it Luke Smith's setup? And to be fair, I mean, it's really good. Name responsible. Whenever someone mentions word suckless, Luke Smith comes to my mind. Yeah. Of course, I mean, he's very, very impactful in regards to that whole, particularly that era a few years ago, pre-pandemic and just after pandemic, where, you know, that was a big thing, all those suckless tools. Kai Hendry as well, he made a big thing about D menu. I can't remember if I think he did use ST in the past. Now, what was funny about him, of course, he's gone completely the other way. He's now using, like, you know, a Mac, whatever. Thanks, James, it works. Wow. See, I am not just an ugly face. I do know what to look for. Well, that's great. So it's actually, after all those years, that's fixed your problem then? Will you just put that in the X11 folder, that config, and it worked? Wow. How funny. I'll do a video on it then. Anybody else? Because again, you know, most people will install what PyCom, right? But if it's just something you can set on the Intel side of the kernel, let's say the Intel driver that's on the kernel, I think that's what it is, for displaying graphics or whatever on X11, then even better. I started with Arch and ended up with Debian because I was having too much issues and everyday school. How funny. Now it's interesting. That's what that guy, what's his name? That YouTube, he doesn't make YouTube videos really anymore. Mashed. Now he was basically the Luke Smith route. He was using like Arch Linux with DWM, and then he said that he installed the 4 GB suite or whatever it is of Android Development Studio, and it broke his Arch install. But this was like schoolwork as well, and I was sort of thinking, you know, maybe keep those things separate. I don't know. It's like this laptop here. This is my testing laptop. That's what it's there for. I don't use it for mine. But, you know, I guess, you know, in schools surely give you extra laptops anyway, but you got to do what you got to do. I actually changed to Arch Linux because of Luke Smith. I was using Debian and Suckless. Big props to Luke Smith. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, his stuff on Linux is probably the best on YouTube. Certainly principle-wise and idea-wise, I think. On a Linux desktop, I don't think it gets any better than his sort of principles, apart from mine, of course. I mean, if you want to go full minimalism, full Linux fundamentals, then obviously using the TTY. Anyway, I joke, kind of. But yeah, really, his is best. Interestingly, the early videos of Brodie Robertson, very good, because he shows you how to do a lot of Linux desktop customization in that sort of vein. And obviously, in more recent years, he's abandoned all that. But Basically, I never learned Linux. I just asked ChatGPT whenever I got a problem. I just asked it. It's on me also. I don't understand it quite. I feel it is comfy to use something stable. Absolutely, TTY is the pinnacle of minimalism. It does kind of surprise me that there hasn't been more, in light of the Luke Smith thing. It does surprise me that maybe, people who are arguably even better suited to create like some sort of desktop environment on the TTY haven't done it, and why. Or maybe people just think it's a bad idea. I think if it wasn't for the frame buffer, it would be a bad idea. But I think because of the frame buffer, I think the TTY is certainly viable as a desktop. The big issue, of course, is the browser. But in the near future, I will be doing a little kind of project on Link's browser in the TTY, more so just like curated websites and Gopher sites where a full browser experience is impossible, clearly, realistically, even with like Browse. It just doesn't really work in the TTY. But my argument would probably be that a curated experience is better than most of the web anyway. And if you do need, like, I don't know how to explain it, probably jumping the gun here because I haven't really looked into it properly yet, but a curated experience in Link's web browser might actually be a good thing and arguably better than using a full browser. Now, there are always going to be exceptions, and generally people are not going to be inclined to use a text-based browser. But I want to make the point that a text-based browser doesn't exclude images or video, just that those are not overlapping magisteria in a text-based browser. What they are you download the images or you load the images into, say, MPV off the server through links or video, and you play it separately. Actually, how the web was first designed by Tim Berners-Lee and the French guy whose name eludes me, because when they built the web, they built it on the next step machines, developer machines. And the next step developer machines were Unix machines, and the web was designed as on an object-orientated system. HTML didn't basically exist. If you want to learn more about that, you just watch Dr. Chuck Internet History. And that actually explains the real intention of the web when it was first made. And the only reason the web became popular was because a couple of things. Gopher, which was more popular than the web at the time in those early-ish days, for the first few years actually, the fools at whatever university is it, Massachusetts University or whatever, that made Gopher or owned Gopher, made it closed source. Tim Berners-Lee obviously spotted that error and convinced CERN to make it open source. The problem with the web was everybody was using PCs, Windows PCs basically, and Windows PCs aren't like next step computers, and nobody's using next step computers, people using PCs. So when they ported web browsers to PCs, they had to make fundamental design choices, which introduced the abysmal HTML language. Then we got CSS and all this nonsense. And the end of separating text from images, which is how text from graphics, which is how Next Step displayed the web. So images weren't in line on a web page. When you had an image, you clicked on the image or you loaded the image and it would open a separate window. So like a tiling window manager, you'd view the image and the text would continue on the side, meaning that ads don't basically exist in the original idea of the internet, because nobody's going to click on an image of an ad, right? Now they could, surreptitiously put ads in there, or, click on a video. So basically the original design of the web was fundamentally sound. The compromise that exists is because of Microsoft PCs that meant everything ended up becoming in line. Now, the argument might also be, as the web developed anyway, there would have probably been pressure to have everything in line. But the original design idea of the internet was good, or the web, sorry. The internet obviously existed long before the web. Wasn't literally like Gopher, because Gopher is obviously its own protocol, but the same design ideas are very much similar. And of course, if Gopher wasn't closed source, and Gopher stayed more popular than the World Wide Web, Gopher would have probably rubbed up against the same design choices because of pressure in a commercial world. In the 90s, the pressure on the World Wide Web was turning everything into making money. And that meant design choices were made that personally I don't think were good. I've sort of done a video on this before, Let's see what people say. I see AI can really give the illusion of knowledge. It sure can. Do you use Emacs? No, I don't use Emacs. The thing with Emacs as well is, of course, it's you need to have a graphics server. I think that's right. To run Emacs, you need to run it on like X11, right? Or I guess does Emacs run on Wayland? I don't know. So no, I don't use Emacs. Emacs just seems to me a very powerful tool, but another layer upon the whole stack of your computer. So you load the Linux console, the TTY, then you load X11, then you load Emacs on top of that, then you load in Emacs, a text editor, web browser, or configs or whatever, which is fine for people who want to do that. But no, I don't use Emacs. I don't have any use for it as far as I can see. Now, I know people who do use Emacs live by it, but in all sincerity, it's clearly as powerful as it is with its own programming language. To me personally, it's just another layer. Emacs doesn't need X11, I think, so. Okay. I thought, well, maybe, I think, obviously, Emacs, like web browser and full functionality, you need X11. I don't know. I'm not the person to ask. It's quite interesting, though. Yeah, I mean, I know, is it DistroTube? He obviously is big on Emacs and has, whole videos setting up his Emacs config. But no, I use TTYSH. That's why. Yeah, I don't use X11. I don't use Wayland. I do, but I use both. I don't use Emacs. I do use Vim though. Obviously, I use Vim. Do we have a Discord community? No, I'm afraid not. We don't have a Discord community, but it is a nice idea. If I was ever going to have a community, I think I'd consider a Discord community, but I don't want to set something up I'm not committed to. Now, maybe if I had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, probably not going to happen. Then I might do it. Or if I had significant numbers. Just to mention Sylvan Franklin, who I've mentioned recently. It's quite interesting. He uses his GitHub channel as his community. So I don't know, if you want, use my GitHub as a discussion forum. Although actually it's probably a bad idea because I've only got 2 repositories. I wonder what Sylvan Franklin does. Maybe I'll do it like that. Okay, so he's got a forum on his GitHub, I think. Is that right? Yeah, so maybe I'd do something like this. It's kind of lazy, really. That's the thing, but TTY chat. Yeah, that's what we need. TTY chat. Not a bad idea. Yeah, I do follow Sylvan Franklin, which is kind of ironic because, of course, I'm not a developer. All right, and his whole thing, and he's a developer, but of course he kind of skirts around, Linux and Vim. I just think, to be fair, I think he just makes interesting-ish videos. I know he's sort of gaming the algorithm. I know he sort of is gaming YouTube for views and whatever, which I think he admits. But he kind of, to be fair, he's kind of earnest in the sense he just does it his way. I don't know. I just find, at least I find his videos interesting. At least it's not just, I know he does a lot of Vim stuff, but it's not just like another, oh, let's review Cosmic Beta, or I don't know. I just think his stuff's kind of interesting. And yeah, he's quite amusing as well. He's quite witty, and he's just, I don't know. He just seems like he's quite a smart person. I feel like if I was a developer, I'd want to learn from him, but I'm not a developer. I know I talk about these things, but it doesn't really affect me because I'm not a developer. But I think if you are a developer, you'd probably want to. That's perfect. No fluff. He has a complicated relationship with Vim. Yeah. Again, I think he does that for effect. When he talks about it, like But I mean, his stuff he does with Vim is pretty impressive, to be fair. If you're not a dev, what's your profession? To be honest, I don't actually have a profession. So over the years, I've done lots of different types of jobs, from physical work to like computer work. But nothing developer-wise. In theory, my original career was going to be, some years ago now, engineering. I was being trained as a engineer, but my manager was insane, and the company I worked for was just scuzzy. I'm not going to name them, but they're a big American company. And this place I worked, I don't know, they were bad. Let's just say that. Basically, I was an engineer, customer complaints engineer. So the company had customers, they would make parts for their customers, and obviously, like any company, you get complaints, right? And my job was to deal with the complaints on an engineering side. So we'd get the complaints, I would investigate the issue with the parts, and then the idea was, if the issue was genuine and there was a genuine problem with these parts, I would do tests on them to find the issue, all this kind of thing. I'd liaise with engineering. I would liaise with production, who made the parts, and then the whole idea was we would fix the problem, and the new parts that were being made wouldn't have this issue, and the customer would be happy. The reality was that the parts never got corrected. The same issues existed because the company didn't want to spend the money. They were happier to get fined by the customer, happier to get investigated by the customer. And in the meantime, we were supposed to lie to the customer that these parts were being fixed. So, yeah, crazy situation, really. Terrible company. Neither am I. I am, and I follow him. Yeah. Follows Sylvan Franklin. He's great. You could tile the TTY with Cosmic. Yeah, I could do. That would be funny. That'd be a twist. Or I could run Cosmic and use TTY in the tiler. Don't know. You imagine that though? Like going from TTYSH to Cosmic, put this in perspective. 130 meg idling to like what, 4 gigabytes idling. I'm exaggerating what Cosmic probably idles at now, but it's probably a couple of gig. But I mean, just apart from your web browser, in all seriousness, when I look at something like Cosmic, apart from loading your web browser, all that extra stuff, I don't know, just I don't know, just this is the thing with Linux, right? If you're running Linux, I don't want to rag on people. Obviously, you know, normal people who just want to use Linux as their daily computer, that's fine. The only thing I'd say, in the long run, if you're somebody who is invested in trying to understand fundamentals, to me, it's like an anathema to use something like Cosmic, because that design choice is like a Windows design choice. When personal computing became big, you know, we started to have the graphical user interfaces, the desktops and whatever. I just find that like an anathema to Linux, in the sense of, like, if you're somebody invested in it, why you'd want all this excess, all this graphical user interface? It's a cliche to say, but it's just bloat. And really, the only answer to that is, even if you've got, you know, billions of packages, huge software suites, I just don't see why anybody in the long run wouldn't run it in a window manager. And certainly, let me put it this way: if you start off the route of using, say, a window manager, why on earth would you ever want to go back to that? Now, there might be reasons. I'm not ragging. It's just a question I have to anybody who does that. And like Brodie Robertson. Now, I know he wanted to look at KDE and show it off, and he was impressed by development, and obviously he's invested, let's say, emotionally. I'm not trying to give him a hard time, but he's obviously invested emotionally in having the Linux desktop having greater success. He's obviously invested in the Linux desktop being relatively popular. And so that's one of the big reasons when KDE came out, Plasma 6, and now Cosmic, he wants to make a big thing over it, because the assumption is these are going to be quite popular with normal people. But it sort of shows that he's using something like Neary, right, which is basically a window manager. I think the real reason is he wants to see the popularity of Linux desktop, not because he personally wants to use a desktop. That's all I see them as useful for, is increasing the popularity to normal people. And I'm not giving normal people a hard time. We've all been there. We've all used desktop environments. Some of us still use desktop environments, but that's just how I kind of feel about it. So you mean I should purely live in TTYL? Yes. No, I'm never an absolutist about that. I'd never tell somebody what they have to do, but I'd always pose the question on if you are interested in the fundamentals of your operating system, and you have window managers available, but you want to obviously run it as a desktop, I just don't see why, with that understanding and that interest, you would want to remain in a desktop environment. I would just assume that people see that as superfluous. Those people, okay, again, if that's what anybody really likes, if for whatever reason they really like living in GNOME or living in KDE or Cosmic Desktop, who am I to say? I just don't personally understand why anybody, the moment they start experiencing a window manager, for example, even a window manager, forgetting the TTY, why you'd want to stick with that, but I don't know. Just my personal perspective on that. To be honest, once I started learning the fundamentals underneath the desktop environment, I couldn't, get away soon. I couldn't get away from it sooner, from that desktop environment. So, Cinnamon or GNOME or KDE, I couldn't wait to get away from it. And it was like looking in the rearview mirror. It's like I never want to go back there. I'm on i3 or DWM. I'm never going back to that. It's just frustrating, personally. I should start living in the TTYL2. Well, hey, if it works for you, I mean, TTYSH is there for you to experiment with. You can see if you can live in the TTY. It pretty much covers as much of a desktop as possible. When did you start using Linux? Sorry if you've been asked this here. No problem. So technically, I've used Linux in like the very late 2000s. I think because I was having an issue with Windows XP, and so I tried it, and it was something like Ubuntu or whatever, and it was fine. Clearly, as a desktop, could be usable. And this is like what I was saying: you're always gonna start with, you know, the cliche Linux desktop. Nothing wrong with that. But here's the thing as well. Ultimately, it did just feel like another, you know, desktop that happened to be running Linux rather than Windows. I know the whole open source thing, but of course, back then with less functionality, unlike now, you know, a lot of the software you can use now is cross-platform. Back then, you know, a lot of programs like Spotify were ropey and all this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, I don't use Spotify anymore, but so when I properly started using it was when so if you've seen any videos on my channel, I've mentioned that I do screenwriting. And one of the issues I've had with Windows is that I was using a program called, I can't remember the name of it now. Oh, what was it called? So I was using a screenwriting software that I can't remember the name of it, that runs on Python 2. It now runs on Python 3, but back then it ran on Python 2. And as you might know, Python 3 came out and broke everything, and Python 2 got depreciated, whatever. I had all these kinds of issues with it. And also I was getting issues with, I didn't like the way Windows, which amuses me personally, the way Windows rendered their text. Windows, for whatever reason, until Windows 11, have never been able to create an operating or a user environment, a Windows user environment that renders text in any way but disgusting. I don't know what it is, but until Windows 11, a few years ago, even Windows 10, their text looked horrific on their menus, on their programs. Whenever a program would obviously use whatever inbuilt. And when I tried to, you know, if you like, troubleshoot this, all the solutions were just, you know, poor. You know, I managed to get it to look not as bad, but you know, when you're dealing with text a lot, and obviously TTYSH is text, when you're dealing with text a lot, particularly when you're screenwriting, it was just like a horrible distraction. So Trelby's the program, I remember now. Trelby's screenwriting software. So what I did, I thought I'm going to use Linux, and so I used Ubuntu because it was nice and lightweight. Used LXDE, whatever, and obviously I wasn't so experienced in Linux, but I could install Ubuntu that used the LXDE environment, had most of the functionality I needed. Would use Trelby, and it looked great. I could do my screenwriting, I could still browse the web, whatever. Do my work, most importantly, and most of what else I needed. So that was how I used it personally. And then I guess I got a new-ish computer, and the newish computer had Windows 10, and I just kind of got back to using Windows 10. And it reminded me of everything wrong with Windows. And although I wasn't using a window manager back in the Ubuntu days, I was, you know, I was just, you know, fed up with like just the whole Windows 10 resource hogging, the speed of it, you know, no matter what I did, just, it was unsatisfying, you know, it was annoying, just got in my way, adverts and nonsense, stupid updates. And so I then came across Luke Smith videos, I think, because I bought a ThinkPad, an old ThinkPad, and I was looking at old ThinkPads, and I came across Luke Smith's video about old ThinkPads, and that's where I saw the power of Linux at a fundamental level using window managers and terminal software and all this kind of thing, and really a way to have bespoke software. So the whole idea is, so I've got a bespoke environment that works for me, so I can do my work, and particularly screenwriting. I've done a video on that. If you look at my old videos on screenwriting, and that's where I am today. So I started out with Red Hat, I think, through a terminal for school. Really cool. I started with Kali Linux because I just wanted to flex, and I'm on a 2nd-gen laptop. Yeah, using Kali Linux, anybody's just going to be, you know, too inferior to your hacking distribution. It's a good way to flex. No problem at all. I start with Ubuntu. I also start with Ubuntu 04 if memory serves. Mostly use Windows at the beginning with Linux in PuTTY. Oh, okay, interesting. Now PuTTY's the like SSH, right? It's like a graphical SSH type client, I think. Am I right? So I guess you are logging into servers, SSH. Yeah. Using it for SSH, I mean the Windows graphical, but it's like a terminal window, yeah. Never personally used it, but I use SSH for my server, my web server. That's about it, really. I use SSH a lot even now. Yeah, SSH is just one of those brilliant tools that were invented, and you know, again, you think all those abstractions on top of SSH, how much software is utilizing SSH. And this also sort of goes back to my point of fundamentals. You know, fundamentally behind all this software is usually some kind of long established tool that never needed a graphical user interface, never needed all this superfluous stuff. It was just rock solid. And SSH is just one of those programs. FFmpeg's, of course, another. This whole stream right now, I'm assuming some way is running through FFmpeg on Google. It's being streamed through all these different bit rates using FFmpeg on Google servers, I assume anyway. We also use some telnet. Okay. How can you sit for so long? I almost die. Can't sit for more than an hour. Yeah, well, that's probably why you can see I'm leaning, because I'm getting restless. Well, I will end the stream in a minute. So unless you guys have got any Linux or whatever questions, or you want to ask something before I go, by all means, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to end the stream in a minute. I use Windows on a AMD GPU and Intel CPU. Should I stop using it? I don't know. GPU driver issues scares me. I don't know. Should you stop using it? Are you having issues with it? I mean, why are you using Windows? Is it like a spare computer? Telnetting into MUDs or some things like that. And I don't remember what I learned about SSH or when it came about. I guess SSH was 95. Yeah, I think it was mid-90s. I think so. By the way, one last question. What studies you had? Sorry if this is a repeated question. So my main education is in business studies. Not at degree level. And at first I didn't know how to use SSH on Windows. I had to get a license for PuTTY. Right. Yeah, so education-wise, it was never really in computing. So at first it was secure CRT with the license, not putty. Secure CRT, never heard of that. Might be getting the timelines mixed up, but anyways, lol. Right, so I'll probably, yeah, good timing. Okay, bye, James. Have a nice and lovely day. You too. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thanks very much for joining the stream. And if you use TTYSH, enjoy. I hope you have fun with it. Otherwise, what are you doing? Why aren't you using it? Are you joking? Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, guys. I might stream tomorrow, so maybe I'll see you then, similar sort of time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Later.